Hello music theory students, Mr. Lefebvre here, talking today about accidentals. Before we jump into accidentals, we need to discuss reading notes with a key signature other than C major. All of our rules from before stay the same. In treble clef, the lines are still E, G, B, D, and F, and the spaces are still F, A, C, and D. In bass clef, we still have G, B, D, F, and A for lines, and A, C, E, and G for spaces. Now, however, if there's a flat or sharp in the key signature, it applies to those notes on the staff. For instance, here we have the key of B flat, so a G would remain a G. A D would remain a D. However, B is now a B flat. Also, E is now E flat. The key signature does not just apply to those notes on the same line or space as the flat or sharp in the key signatures. Any and all B's and E's would also be considered flat. So this last E is also E flat. Let's do an example with a sharp key. Here we're in the key of A. Our first note is A, and there's no sharp in the key signature, so it's simply an A. Same with our D. Next we have C. There's a C sharp in the key signature, so this is a C sharp. Next we have an F. There's also an F sharp in the key signature, so this is an F sharp. Finally we come to a G. Although there is no sharp on the G line, there is still a G sharp in the key signature, so this is also G sharp. To cancel a flat or sharp, you use a natural sign. A natural is drawn as an L and a 7 overlapping to make a small box between the two. Any flats, sharps, or naturals not in a key signature are called accidentals. There are a couple of rules about accidentals. First, an accidental applies for a whole measure. If you have an F sharp accidental in a measure followed by an F without any accidental, the second F is also sharped. You can see this in the first measure. Rule 2. Once a new measure begins, you default back to the flats or sharps signaled by the key signature. Let's try a couple examples of reading notes and accidentals in different keys. Here we are in the key of D flat, so we have B, E, A, D, and G's flatted. We begin with a G. Since there's a G flat in the key signature, we write G flat. Next is a B. Again, there's a B flat in the key signature, so it's B flat. The same applies to A flat. And again, we return to G flat. The next measure begins with an F. There is no F flat in the key signature, so we simply write F. Next we have an E. There is an E flat in the key signature, so it's an E flat. We move to D. There is again a D flat in the key signature, so we write D flat. Next we come to an E natural. We do not need to check the key signature, as the natural sign tells us that we will have an E natural. The last measure begins with a D natural. We then have a C, which is not noted in the key signature, so it's also natural. Next we come to a D. Checking the key signature, we see that we should have a D flat, but earlier in the measure we had an accidental telling us that a D was natural. Since a new measure has not begun, this is also D natural. And we end on a C. Here we are in the key of E major, so we have F, C, G, and D sharps. We start with an E, which is not listed in the key signature, so it's natural. Then we have a G, which is a G sharp in the key signature, so we have a G sharp. Next is a B, also not listed in the key signature. Next we have an accidental telling us that our next C will be natural. We have a C following that as well. However, we are in a new measure, so we default back to the key signature, where we are told that we have a C sharp. Next we have B and A, neither of which are listed as sharp in the key signature. Then we have a G, again listed in the key signature, so it's G sharp. The final measure begins with an accidental A sharp. Then we have a B, not listed in the key signature, so it's simply a B. Next we have an A. Our initial thought would be to check the key signature and see that there is no sharp listed. However, we had an A sharp earlier in the measure, therefore we have another A sharp. The final note is an A natural. Although we just had an A sharp, This natural cancels that sharp, so we end with an A natural. To review, naturals cancel a sharp or flat. Sharps, flats, and naturals not listed in a key signature are called accidentals. Accidentals apply for an entire measure, and once a new measure begins, we revert back to the original key signature. Thanks for watching.